I'm excited to talk today about automation and device usage. I think today's overall goal is to see the different types of automated tools that HeadSpin supports and can integrate with, and take a look at a high level, as well as go into some practical examples of the integration or running, for example, Appium on the platform, running Espresso or XCUITest on the platform, and how they kind of intertwine together. So for those who don't know me, my name is Scott Mercer. I'm currently our Senior Director of Customer Success, and looking forward to this enablement session here together. So if we look at our agenda, really kind of the high level topics I want to cover are looking at the tools that we support here at HeadSpin from an automated perspective. We're not going to get into every single tool. There's many tools in the market. Many customers use many different things, but from a high level, I tried to cover at least, I'd say, the top 4 automated tools that I see our customers leveraging on a daily basis. So then we can get into some Appium, both Appium and Selenium fundamentals, a little bit about what they are and how they're used. By no means is this a session on Appium or trying to teach people how to leverage Appium. I think the assumption coming into this is that most people have a high level understanding of what Appium is and how it can be used. We'll touch on a couple slides about, I guess you could say, what it is. But we have plenty of resources inside the company. Plus, I believe we may have a session on Appium itself. So this isn't going to go into, selector strategies or kind of the architecture, but more of how it plugs into HeadSpin and how you can run your test on HeadSpin. So that's more of the goal and the agenda of today. Then we can look at some custom HeadSpin capabilities that we throw on top of Appium that allow our customers to easily complete the user flow and user journey of automation on the platform. We can look at how the Appium Inspector plugs into HeadSpin, which is a newer feature. And then I also have a section on commonly used APIs from device management, automation, performance capture, and performance monitoring aspects. So as I'm sure many people know, we have a plethora of APIs on the platform, but I tried to highlight commonly used ones. By no means are they the only ones used by customers, but I tried to look at ones that are used on a daily basis to leverage the different features and functionalities of HeadSpin. So with that being said, we can kind of jump into what are the automation tools that HeadSpin supports. I try to just cover maybe like the top 5, and really I think it's like the top 3. I'd say maybe the top 4. So we can see the list here of Appium, Selenium, which are obviously open source tools that I would say 90% of our customers are leveraging. When we talk about mobile automation, I'd say like 90 to 95% of our customers are all leveraging Appium to run automation on the platform. And then if you look at customers leveraging our browser capabilities, essentially I'd say 100% of them are using Selenium to execute tests against it. There are a couple of different use cases where I've seen Lighthouse integrated into the platform using our bridge. But I'd say, once again, about 100% of our customers that are testing web browsers are leveraging Selenium. When we look at the next 2, those are native testing tools built by both the respective operating systems of mobile devices, so or manufacturers and operating systems. So we can look at Espresso, which is an Android tool used to test native Android applications. It's built in to the source code. It's more of a gray box testing tool. And this can be leveraged on the platform as well. I'd say we have a smaller number of customers, once again, doing this, but we do have some customers leveraging the bridge to test via Espresso. Same thing on the iOS side. We do support XCUITest, which is a native testing tool for iOS. Very small number, once again, but this is done through the bridge, and we'll kind of get into how to achieve this. Then you can look at Earl Grey, which is actually an open source tool built by Google to test iOS devices or iOS applications, native iOS applications, and Calabash, which is another open source tool. I'd say Earl Grey and Calabash are very limited. Maybe 1 or 2 customers are leveraging this today, if not none, but they are tools that are supported, and won't cover them in terms of examples today, but just wanted to throw them on there in case you have customers with questions regarding these types of tooling. So at a high level, I say it's top heavy. Once again, many of our customers are leveraging Appium and Selenium from a automated standpoint. So I guess we can get into the next topic, which is what is Appium, right? I think mostly everybody has a high level understanding of what Appium is, but I know this is for everybody inside the company to come up to speed. So essentially, Appium is an open source test automation framework that you can use to test native, hybrid, and mobile web applications. You can it's cross-functional, meaning you can test both iOS and Android applications. It uses the WebDriver protocol in its client-server architecture, right? So pretty straightforward approach to testing. It's a black box testing tool that uses drivers behind the scenes to interact with the applications under test. So at a very, very high level, this is probably as deep as we'll get into what Appium is today. Once again, I'll point to some resources coming up here in the presentation of where you can get better understanding and training on Appium, which are internal resources. But most of the training today works on the fact of you already understand Appium, at least at a high level, and actually how to run them on the platform instead of how to create automated testing. So two kind of different topics, but just want to make clear of what the goal of today is. When you look at really how Appium works, well, once again, as I mentioned, it's client-server architecture. So as we kind of look at this graph here, you can see how it interacts with the different medians to test on, right? Whether we're talking about iOS, Android devices, and the different drivers that go with it, right? So the Appium client from your test script communicates over the WebDriver protocol to the Appium driver, which then translates it into I guess you could say language that's understood by the application to execute user interactions against it, right? So this is kind of the landscape of the Appium driver ecosystem, right? At a high level, we can see two commonly used ones over here, which is UI Animator 2, which would be used to automate Android applications, and then obviously XCUITest driver, which would be used to automate iOS applications. So we can see Espresso driver as well, which could be leveraged for Android. I'd see more commonly UI Animator 2 is being used, and then we can see some other one-off drivers that are used for whether your application was designed and built with Flutter or ties in a TV driver. So many different drivers out there, but I'd say most commonly used here and heavy is on the left side, at least from customers leveraging HeadSpin today. So just wanted to kind of keep that at a high level and give a basic understanding of what Appium is, excuse me, and how it's being used. Selenium, very similar, both built, I'd say Appium is built on top of Selenium. Once again, it's an open source automated testing framework that's used to validate web applications against different browsers and platforms. I think the beauty of it is that it can be leveraged in any client-side programming language. So we can see a list of them there, like Ruby, Java, Node, PHP, Python, C#. That's the same with Python. I mean, that's the same with Appium. I think the beauty of it is that it allows you flexibility in terms of how to implement and create test suites and test cases in the programming language of your choice. The beauty of it also is that it's, at least on the Appium side, some pros and cons. I know that's not on the slide here, but I think some very big pros for customers is it is a black box testing tool. You don't need source code access, and it's cross platform, right? So you can have the same test suite executing against both Android and iOS applications. Instead of if you were going a native testing route, you'd have to maintain two separate code bases, one in UI Automator 2 or Espresso, and one in XCUITest to test natively. So we can get more into the pros and cons. I don't go too much of that into this inside this presentation either, but wanted to give a high level understanding of both Selenium and Appium as they're being heavily used on HeadSpin today. It follows the same client server architecture, right? So when we kind of get into what it looks like to run this on HeadSpin, you know, HeadSpin's hosting and running the Appium server and services, both the Selenium and Appium server and services on our host machines. We expose the remote WebDriver URL, which allows the client, anything running the client library to execute against the devices hosted on HeadSpin. So One thing to note inside this presentation, as it will go into the Confluence page, there are references here to different links and resources that maybe give you a better and higher understanding of what Appium and Selenium are if you're unfamiliar with them, allow you to kind of dig into more of their architecture and how they can be leveraged, because we won't get into too much of that depth. The next two slides are just resources, once again, that I think are super useful if you wanted to get up to speed on HeadSpin, on Appium and Selenium. HeadSpin University, right? This is an internal tool that we've built out. Jonathan Lips has been the leader of this, of course. And there's, I don't know how many classes there are today. That's bad of me to say, but I know that there is a paid Appium Fundamentals course, which is free to all HeadSpin employees. So I linked the registration link here. Once you register, you can ping Jonathan Lips on Slack or email, just ask him for to be enrolled into the premium course, and you can get free access. If you're looking to increase your skills or just get a better understanding of how Appium works, this is the place to do it. There's an industry certificate at the end. Once you pass the courses, there's different tasks and assignments that you have to turn in from a scripting perspective. So if you want to just take a look at the course and look through the modules and get a better understanding at a high level, that's a great thing to do. If you want to complete the course, that's even better. So I wanted to link this here for everybody to understand that there are resources inside the company to use to further your skills and get a better understanding. And then there's also Appium Pro. So Appium Pro is a newsletter written by Jonathan Lips, once again, that covers all things Appium. Very useful resource when it comes to understanding, I'd say, different Appium challenges and problems, and then just questions and examples. So if you have a question about Appium, you want to search it over Google and throw Appium Pro in the back, I'm sure there's an article out there that will help address your questions in terms of how to execute different use cases in test suites with Appium. So those are two great resources to learn more. And I just wanted to link those in here. So I stole some of this beautiful work from Severin's presentation, but I thought it's a really good illustration of how we deploy. But I wanted to cover what Appium and Selenium look like on HeadSpin. So essentially, since it's client server architecture, as we spoke about, we host the Appium services, Appium and Selenium services on each host machine. So as you can see here, we look at our Linux and Mac machines that we deploy either in the cloud or on-prem, that obviously are connected to the phones on the platform. On those machines, we run our Appium services, which then the client can connect to directly. So each host runs its own Appium services. So we'll kind of get into the nuances of how to maintain and manage that from a client perspective. But if you have 4 different host machines in your deployment, that you have, any devices spread across, you essentially have 4 different servers, Appium servers that you're able to run your test scripts against, depending on what device under test that you're looking to use. So this is one way to do it. This is without using our Appium load balancer. Our next slide will go into another way of actually executing, which includes a little proxy server here that I can show here, which is essentially called our Appium load balancer. So our Appium load balancer is really just a proxy server that sits in between the client and our Appium services that allow you to have a single endpoint, a single WebDriver URL that stays constant, and then use selector strategy inside your desired capabilities to essentially select a specific device under test, in which the proxy server will forward your request to that specific server. So either in this type of not type of deployment, but in this type of setup, if you would like to contact the server directly, you would just use that specific WebDriver URL, which can be hard-coded into your scripts. It can be retrieved at runtime via some of our APIs that we'll show, well, I guess those are the two ways. Either you have to hard code it or you have to retrieve it at runtime, or you can pass it in at runtime if your script allows for such things from like a config file. Inside the load balancer, it simplifies it where you have a single endpoint, which could be hard coded into the script, as it will stay constant and will not change. And then From there, you can actually go ahead and use selector strategy once again inside your desired capabilities to select a device. So that logic can come from your script itself and can spread out. The logic could be as simple as just give me any available Android device on the platform to start testing with. It will go ahead and randomly select one from your pool of available devices. You can go for, give me any Android device running Android 8 or Android 9, Android 10. That's the type of logic that you can pass into your desired capabilities, which allows you to select devices. So a little bit different. I have customers using both, very different ways of thinking, but it depends on how you architect your test suite and the different aspects of it that you want to either handle yourself or have HeadSpin handle via our Appium load balancer. So wanted to kind of look at it from a high level of how Appium is running on our services and how a client would actually contact those services. So outside of this, configuring your Appium client, right? So one thing I do want to kind of outline is that inside HeadSpin, we support vanilla Appium, right? And I think I actually cover this in some parts of this, but I guess it's not written here, but we support vanilla Appium and we support Appium out of the box. I mean, we don't fork Appium like open source Appium and add any custom vendor lock-in. Some of our customers do this. For example, Perfecto has their own version of Appium that as you consume it on their platform, they have custom functions. And as you write your test scripts, essentially they will only work on Perfecto. They have built-in functions. Ours is not that at all. We do have custom capabilities that we'll get into later, but those just add on to the features and functionalities of more of HeadSpin than Appium itself. Its capabilities to add tests to user flows, add custom tags, start a performance session, things that really just inhibit HeadSpin to work properly, but they can be easily removed or even passed into a vanilla Appium server, and it's not going to affect the execution of the test. So when customers come to us with an already built out Appium test suite, really the bulk of the work can be done in a matter of minutes. Really, they would just need to update their WebDriver URL as well as the minimum desired capabilities and point it to our services to begin to run on. So what you can see here in our UI, and I'll do a practical example of this later, but what you can see in our UI here is when you're in the device list, if you click on the more info buttons here on the far right, you can see a button that says automation configuration. When you go ahead and click on that, it's going to actually show you two different configurations: a device configuration, which this is that unique WebDriver URL that corresponds to this specific host that is right now hosting these just these two devices for this customer. And then obviously we'll give you the minimum desired capabilities to connect to this device as well. So in here for both Android and iOS, we just include the bundle ID or app activity and app package for the settings application, as every device has the settings. Customers are going to have their own desired capabilities. I'd say the most important aspect here is the WebDriver URL. I don't have a picture of it, but we can show it live inside the platform. There's also a load balance configuration. In here, you'll get that single endpoint. So if you look at just the device configuration, that WebDriver URL is this link here to connect to your Appium client or to point your Appium client, the server to send the APIs to. So it's this missing link here. If we look at using the load balancer, when you're looking at this, I guess you could say this link inside our config, it's going to be that single endpoint. When you click on this, it would give you inside the capabilities a selector strategy, a very basic selector strategy to get you started testing on this specific device that you have selected. But there's just two different ways to do it. All this information is retrievable via API, and I have that API listed in the presentation in just a little bit. So pretty straightforward when you're guiding customers along, well, how do I hook up my Appium test? Well, here's the information needed. And this also can be viewed inside the remote control tab as well. Inside the remote control tab, as you have control of a device, you'll see an automation tab where the same information is actually listed. So a couple of different ways to get there, but very, very straightforward in terms of plugging and playing with Appium. I don't have a Selenium example, and I can expand these slides to do that, but it's going to be the same thing. Essentially, Selenium is just going to give you a very similar WebDriver URL as well as minimum desired capabilities. I'd say it's a one-to-one comparison in hooking up a Selenium test to the platform as well. When you're looking at configuring Appium client from a code perspective, I have a very basic example. We can run this together after I kind of go through the slides here, but you would just translate what you see here and what you've copied and pasted from the platform into your client code. So this is the Python Appium client, very, very basic and straightforward, very simple test script that's going to click on a couple buttons and exit out. In this case, you can see I'm just translating the information, the exact information that's in this UI into the client code. So we can look at this together and execute it. But all of the logic that a customer could have in terms of their test cases can stay the exact same, as long as they update where that remote URL is and the minimum desired capabilities. Most of the capabilities actually can stay the same. More of the ones you're looking to change would be the UDID of the device, platform version in this case would change, could change. Device name would change, it could change, but the most important would be you update the UDID of the device so the server knows which device under test you're looking to execute, or which device you're looking to execute the test on, I should say. So very, very straightforward. I can give these, I have 2 test projects to kind of walk through here today. And I can add those both to the Confluence page that everybody can download and play with themselves. I'll also show today inside Appium IDE how you can leverage it to create a very basic project like you're seeing here. So everybody should be able to at least plug in a single test script into the platform and start executing for themselves. But with that being said, viewing automation. So once you go ahead and execute a test on the platform, what you'll see is the device under test will then switch from a either start remote control or start Appium session view into a magnifying view with a cancel button as well. Once you go ahead and click on that magnifying view, you'll see something very similar to this. So in this case, I had the logs showed. You can filter by showing or hiding the logs. But what this allows you to do is view the execution. I think we covered this in the first training session. Very, very straightforward. But this is a view-only mode. This is an automation lock that we have on the device. When you're in this view, you don't have the ability to actually interact with the device. So you can't, input gestures. It's going to lock the device from an automated standpoint to allow you to only view. So just thought I would cover that and ensure that everybody's on the same page. So some HeadSpin Appium capabilities I want to kind of run through. There's many more. I kind of cherry picked at least what I thought was the most important, what I see customers using and leveraging the most. I've also linked the documentation to our documentation on the platform for all of our HeadSpin Appium capabilities. We also have a Selenium capabilities section, but a lot of them actually continue or are one for one. And I can run through these. So I think one of the most important, one of the most important, I'd say, is the ability to specify Appium version. So we actually have the ability to run different versions of Appium on a single host. So what you can actually do, and I can show this, is you can actually take this WebDriver URL, you can go ahead and append a /versions at the end, and that will actually return to you the versions that are currently installed on that host. I'm going blank on exactly what version is defaulted on the platform. I believe it's defaulted on a per host basis, but 1.17 is very common across the platform. 1.20, 1.21, 1.22. So, and the beauty of using HeadSpin Appium on HeadSpin is at runtime you can specify which version of Appium you want to use. So it's just a simple capability. You pass in the version that you want to use inside that capability, and at runtime, we'll use that version of Appium. So you're not locked into a specific version on the platform. and can be very useful for customers. I say the next three are some of the most important. Let me go back, apologies. When we look at HeadSpin capture, this is going to turn on network and video capture. And it actually ties the capture to the Appium session. So as you initiate the Appium session, it's going to initiate a performance session on the platform. When you clean up and quit the Appium test, it's going to end the performance session. So it intertwines them together. Very straightforward to use. You don't have to use our API to start and end a performance session. You know, a single line of code and you already get essentially all of the benefits of our performance capture, right? The app doesn't necessarily need to be instrumented. It can be, but it doesn't have to be instrumented. You don't have to embed anything into the source code of the application or the test script. You essentially bring your scripts from already existing scripts onto the platform. You add a single capability, then you get all of our performance capture out of the box. So real big value to our customers. And then the next two obviously are capture.video, capture.network. So there's some use cases in which maybe you don't want to capture the network. You only want to have video capture. Maybe it's for some visual analytics. Or if you have a pinned application, a network pinned application, and you don't want to mess with the functionality of the application, you can do a video only capture. So essentially inside your test case, you would ignore setting the HeadSpin capture, and you just set the capture.video to true, and that would enable video only. Same thing with network. There could be times that you don't want to capture the screen. Not as common, to be completely honest with you. I see a lot of what we're doing. If it is a one-off session, mostly it's a video only session and not a network only session. But there are use cases out there that would need, maybe for a video capture to be turned off. In that case, we allow you to at least capture the network and debug it from a networking point of view. So a couple of different ways to do it. But I think they're actually the most important in use capabilities on the platform. The last one, or the last two that have to do with capture would be ignore hosts. So this gives you the ability to pass in essentially hosts to ignore from our network capture. These could be hosts that are displaying TLS exceptions, or anything that you want to filter out of our network capture, our man-in-the-middle proxy. You can do that with the ignore host capability. And then the network config capability allows you to shape the network config. So we can I linked the documentation. It's not showing as a link here, but you can even see my pointers coming up. So I linked the documentation here. This allows you to network and spoof or spoof the network. So you can limit packets, limit up and down bandwidth, things like that, simulate a poorer network at runtime on a specific device. So those are a couple things around capture itself. The next three belong to performance monitoring or performance capture and performance monitoring, but this gives you the ability, for example, to add session tags. Add session tags when you initialize the test. So this could be any metadata that you want to apply to the test. These are key value pairs. You can see some examples here. It's just a JSON key value pair array of JSON key value pairs. And this is any metadata that you want. This could be build number. This could be tester. It could be really any information that you want. And all this information is also exported to replica. So it could be queried at the end. The test name allows you to add a test to a specific user flow. So this could be done via API at the end of a test with the session ID, but it is a lot easier to actually just include it as a capability when initiating the test case. It automatically will append it to that user flow. If that user flow does not exist, it will create that user flow on the platform. And then all you have to do at the end of your test is go ahead and actually update the status, right? So pass, failed, or excluded. And we'll kind of get into that once again at the end. Test data would allow you to add custom measurements to the session. These custom measurements could be measurements that are done via really any of our visual analytics as well. You can capture the visual analytics, do some post-processing, and then append it to the session. That really wouldn't happen from a capability standpoint, because these are all appended at the beginning of the test. But this does allow you to add any custom measurements. These custom measurements could come from the customer's internal telemetry as well. Have many customers that not only rely on HeadSpin's data, but their own internal telemetry, and they blend and mesh it all together. And the beauty of adding custom measurements allows you to export both that telemetry and obviously our metrics into Replica. You can query them, you can see them side by side in the same dashboard. So we really don't limit that. We encourage customers to not only use and trust our metrics, but use and trust their own. And this is a way to do that. There's APIs for all of this, of course. There's APIs that I'll show that allow you to do session tags, test names, and test data, which could be done at the end of a test run as well. But this is all from a capability perspective and makes it a little bit easier. Sorry, my mouse is going a little crazy. Wait for available timeout. This is just more of a device management capability. This is the timeout, the time to wait for a device to be available. So when you're initiating a test case on a specific device, when you're not using the load, well, it does apply when you're using load balancer, but if the device was currently locked and you wanted to wait 60 seconds to see if the devices would become unlocked, you can specify that in this wait for available timeout. And then I think the last one is the AppId. And this is a very useful capability that allows you to pass in an AppId, which is the way you get an AppId is by uploading IPAs or APKs to our central app repository. So each org and each customer has their own app repository, which is accessed via the app APIs in our documentation that allows you to upload and retrieve specific applications. So using this capability at runtime, you can pull down a specific application from that repository and install it on the device under test, and is a very seamless interaction to do so. So those are what I'd say, just a few of many capabilities, but I think are very commonly used capabilities that make the features and functionalities of HeadSpin easily accessible via Appium. So once again, these aren't really adding to the Appium experience. These are more of adding to the HeadSpin experience, right? So we're not doing any custom functions inside Appium, but more of how to organize your tests on the platform and how to upload specific data to a specific test. So very straightforward, but good things to know. So a recent feature, I'd say, I think it was in about end of Q3 or early Q4, was the idea of bringing Appium IDE into the platform. Historically, you have to download either Appium Desktop or HeadSpin's lightweight version of Appium IDE to run it with devices on HeadSpin, right? So you'd have to have a separate application outside the platform connecting in, which is great, easy to use, but this is even easier to use, right? So what you can see now is inside the device view, you'll see a start button plus this Appium logo. The Appium logo will allow you to start an Appium session with the inspector enabled right away. Once you do that, once you go ahead and click on the Appium button here, this is the view it will kick you into. You can see an Appium session is initialized on the device, and it also enables it in control lock view. So one capability that I didn't put in here is this HeadSpin control lock. Control lock, actually, if you set that to true, actually puts a user lock on the device when the Appium session is initiated instead of an automated lock. So a control lock will actually bring you into remote control view where you can still interact with the device, a very similar view to this. And then the automated lock is obviously the view with the magnifying glass where it's a view only mode. So this allows you to start an Appium session in control lock and also initiates the Appium inspector inside our UI. You can interact with the device via Appium inspector via our remote control. This is a very, very amazing tool to debug Appium sessions as well as develop Appium scripts. So here you can see, and we can get in this together, but you can see the view hierarchy here, the app source. You can find selector strategies for your user journey throughout the application that needs to be completed. And also it gives you the ability to actually record and export tests inside any Appium client library. It even will allow you to have a boilerplate. It doesn't include things like weighting strategies and best practices inside of Appium. You know, it's essentially just going to throw out selecting elements and connecting to this specific device. But, you know, it's very useful when trying to build and debug your specific script. So really amazing feature. I think a feature that our customers were asking for quite some time, and it's amazing that we're able to deliver against this. So yeah. So when we look at Espresso execution, so we kind of looked at, okay, how do you execute as Appium or Selenium on the platform? Obviously, it's client server architecture, so we're hosting those services on our side, and any client can go and contact them with a valid API token in the WebDriver URL or the Appium load balancer URL. But how do we look at Espresso execution and XCUITest execution? Both not as commonly used on the platform, and there can be some confusion if you've not done this before. So all native testing is done through our debug bridge. So what you can see here is in our UI, in the tools panel, you get this remote debug bridge. This is our newer version of it. You know, historically we had the ADB Connect and the HS debug, so different bridges for both Android and iOS, and now we've done an amazing job of simplifying that to use the same HS Connect for both iOS and Android. So essentially you have to download our HS CLI tool. You can do that from the UI here. You can do it from your settings, which in the platform can be achieved by clicking on your name in the top right and going to settings. Once that's installed on your system, what you can do is you can go ahead and just copy and paste this from our URL, our UI into your terminal. Once you go ahead and do that, a successful message will look something like this. So 1 of 1, this device in New York is now available locally. Now on my local device, if I go ahead and do an ADB devices -L, I can see that it's listing this device that is actually coming from the platform and is now viewed as a local device. So what that does is it allows me to bring, it allows all native tools to see this as a locally connected device. And then you can do things via Android Studio, for example, to do Espresso. So I can pull this up and we can view this together. This test failed. It's funny that I have a test failed. It's actually just an assertion inside the test case that failed, not connecting. So it actually was able to run. Inside Android Studio, you can easily push your builds to this device. You can see this is that 1+ that I was connecting to. It's viewed inside Android Studio as it's viewed over ADB. And I have this add contact recorder test that I actually ran against the device. So you can push your builds. You can use Gradle command line tools to do this from the command line. But pretty straightforward, right? And it's actually a really good experience for debugging and testing applications on the edge. So when we get into a further topic in a couple of weeks in CI/CD, it gets a little bit different when we talk about CI/CD integrations with Appium compared to native testing, because when you look at like plugging this in, you have to retrieve, you know, the specific device that you want to test on. You got to connect it to the local device, and you got to execute the test via that bridge. When you're talking about, you know, having like agent machines inside a CI/CD pipeline that are spinning up, it gets a little bit more complex than just like client server architecture where, you know, you have a WebDriver URL and you're just sending APIs to it. So we'll get into that in the CI/CD section of this enablement, which I believe is coming in a couple weeks. But from a very high level, if you just wanted to kick off an Espresso test, it can easily be done via our bridge. And the same thing on XCUITest, right? So same thing inside our overview tab for iOS devices, you'll see the same link. This is the HS Connect. What you can see here is you go ahead and paste that into your terminal. You get the same thing, right? This iOS device is now available locally. And then if you open up Xcode, we can see this specific iOS device, and then you can go ahead and kick off. I have this example. I won't run it here today because there's some signing issues. I need to define a specific device that's on a specific profile, but if we want to do a separate session on this, we can do this, but all this can be done once again through Xcode. So very straightforward, a little bit more nuances when we get into CI/CD, but definitely can be done. And all is done through the bridge today. And then we kind of get into, well, what does an automated user journey look like on HeadSpin? And then we only have 13 minutes left, and I kind of do want to get into these. So I'm probably going to aim for about at 7:55 getting into the examples. But I think sometimes there's confusion on what does, what's a perfect automated journey on HeadSpin look like, right? Where you start a test suite, you capture every test case with a separate performance session. You add that to a user flow. You add it to a user flow with a status of pass, failed, or excluded, and then you can view the data, right? And these are kind of the high level steps of doing that. I mean, there's many. There's probably could be a couple more before one if we're talking about plugging it into CI/CD. That could be checking for device availability, but at a very dumbed down. I shouldn't even say dumbed down, but like at a very straightforward position, this is how we should be enabling our customers to run automation on HeadSpin, right? So one simple, you establish an automation session. This could be Espresso, this could be Appium. There's really no differences, right? You have to establish that automated session. And the means to do that doesn't really matter in this case, right? Because the user journey should be the same. From there, you start a performance capture, right? If you're using Appium, you can use the Appium capability. You can still use the APIs that we'll go through. If you're using native, unfortunately, you have to just use the capture API. There's no idea of capabilities that would tie the sessions together. After the test has finished, you would add that session to a user flow with the status of pass, failed, or excluded, right? I believe in parts of our enablement so far, we've gone over what a user flow is, but it's a grouping of tests on the platform that allow you to query it from the business intelligence database that we refer to as Replica. From there, what we're going to do is also, you should apply session tags for any metadata. We do have a feature that will auto apply generic tags to a session, but you also have the ability to add your own custom tags, right? That could be build versions, that could be anything coming from your internal services that will allow you to identify or group specific sessions. Because when we get into our current regression modules, it's all about building buckets of tests via session tags. So that once again is a topic for another day, but you want to apply all the metadata to a session that you can. From there, you want to apply session labels for any custom measurements, annotations, or visual analytics, right? We want our customers to ask questions against the sessions, whether it be how long did it take to cold start this application? How long did it warm start this application? What is the score of my video content? How long did it take to load this specific page? When did this specific button change to this specific color, right? Those are all questions you can ask against the session, all using our annotations and visual analytics, right? That are developing every single day. And they're amazing. I think customers get so much value, but we have to point customers in the direction of using these, right? So after you've run a session, you have that performance capture. It's appended to a user flow. Now you're adding your custom data, whether it be session labels or session tags. And then from there, all that data will be synced with Replica and can be visualized in either the M or D tab. Mostly used as the D tab, which is Grafana built into the platform that connects directly to Replica. This is where you can see those KPIs visualized, run, overrun. Allows you to deep link into sessions that may have question marks around them and such. So this, I think, is the journey that we should be pushing all of our customers to use. So not only are they just bringing their existing Appium sessions or Appium tests over the platform, but when you use HeadSpin properly, you get all of this additional data out of the box that allows you to not only test functionally if they're a functional customer and get all this performance data on top, but even if you are running a performance suite, get very refined KPIs from an end user perspective. So I kind of wanted to get that across. So here are some APIs. I think with the last 8 minutes, I'm actually going to probably kick into the examples of kind of running these test cases and such, and grabbing it in the UI itself. I think that's more beneficial. This obviously will be available in the next section, which is just maybe about 5 or 6 slides. It just goes over the major APIs that are used, that I think are used on a daily basis by our customers, from some device management, like rebooting a device or locking a device or grabbing all the automation config of the device, or of the devices in your pool. We can look at it for apps, so installing APKs and IPAs, uploading them to the app repository. So these are all curl examples. You can copy and paste these into your terminal. I actually have a Postman workbench that includes most of these too, that I can link in the Confluence page for anybody to download and use inside of Postman. It's pretty structured across iOS, Android, device APIs and such. There's audio APIs in there as well. So I'll provide that. And then obviously with these slides, you can get a better idea of, I'd say, the most commonly used. So when we look at performance capture, starting and stopping a capture session, adding tags and adding labels, which we saw were things you can do via capabilities, but also via API, video analysis, visual page load analysis, which is amazing. And then performance monitoring, attaching a session to a user flow, updating the status of a session, and then adding custom measurements to a session. So things about adding it to that user flow, some test cases on the platform, right? So running Appium, with that, right, I'm going to look at kick out of this what it looks like. Let's just take a very simple and look at test case. This is that one I showed in the example here. What you can see is, it's inputting 2 user inputs into the device itself. And in here, it's essentially just going to click into Wi-Fi and then click back. Here you can see the minimum start capabilities, which are essentially just copy and pasted from our UI and the remote WebDriver URL. So this is actually executing on this Palo Alto 120 host, just to kind of showcase what I see here as well. When we go into our UI, we can see the automation configuration. So this is the tap to copy and paste. You can also see the Appium load balancer. What you'll see here is that constant URL with your API token embedded into it. And then here you can see this HeadSpin selector, which we didn't get into too much of the load balancer itself, but we could probably spend an hour on that. But this is that selector strategy to, in this case, select any iPhone XR that's available for me to start testing on. What I'll do is I'll just kick this off and we can watch it execute here together. This is very simple, right? This is not including any performance capture. This is not including really any of that user journey that I had specified, but it's a very simple example to connect to an iOS device via Appium on the platform, right? So this is running obviously on my local machine. It's running the Python client library, Python Appium client library, and then it's sending commands to our servers to execute against this specific device. So you can see very simple test case of just clicking on Wi-Fi and back into settings. Nothing too special, and it executed and passed. No assertions, not really a real test case, but more of just a boilerplate of how to connect. I'd say a more important and something I'll link inside our customer success repository. So we're building out a customer success repository in terms of examples for customers from really all aspects of the platform and all Appium client libraries. So Java examples, JavaScript examples, Python examples that walk through that user journey that I had just shown. This is that. So this is a more in-depth test. This actually follows a lot of different frameworks from or structures of tests, for has a page object model. It's using the PyTest framework inside of Python. It's actually going to execute here 2 tests on a single driver. So I leave the driver, but essentially I create 2 Appium. I create 2 performance sessions, right? So I decouple Appium and performance capture by not adding that to the desired capabilities. So here you'll see I actually don't even specify an app activity and app package because I want to actually measure cold start. And I'm actually not instantiating a capture session via here. I'm actually using all of our APIs to do that. And what this is going to do is actually going to establish in a single Appium session 2 different performance sessions. The first one's going to measure cold start by using visual page load analysis. The next one's going to measure screen transition time inside the settings app using visual page load analysis. So these are all APIs that I'm calling at the end. It's actually going to also name the session. So give a name and description of the session via our API. it's going to upload the results. So it's going to take the session ID, add it to this example one user flow and give it a status of passed. And then it's going to make those page load requests using timestamps that are calculated with logic inside the test case. So this is that complete end-to-end user journey of how we would like to guide customers in using automation. And we can actually view that here together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to pass in my API token, kick off the test. It's a little more structured of a test, but we can watch it execute here together on this Android device. So what you'll see in this case, now you can see that I'm actually going to go ahead and start the performance session. I'm going to link this in the new tab over here. So it's going to start the performance session. It's going to load the settings page. It's going to click into Wi-Fi and then click out. What it's going to do here is you can see it actually stopped performance session. So here I'm using those APIs that I was kind of describing that are in the last couple slides of my presentation. And here it's going to keep this Appium session though. I'm actually going to create 2 performance sessions on a single Appium instance. So it's going to kick off again. We're starting here, and then it's going to go ahead and actually measure the time it takes to load the display page using visual page load analysis. So here we can see it kind of just walking through here. So it's starting capture, stopping capture. So here we're going to kick off again. It's starting. And from there, once it goes ahead and starts, it's going to click display and then exit out. And from there, we can see it stop. What we'll see in the performance tab here is from the first example, I went ahead and used our APIs to label this. So the date and time that it had executed. And just an example, you can see it already, I did not add these session tags. This is pretty much a feature flag inside our platform that allows you to add, I guess you could say out of the box session tags or metadata to the session. So all of this is exported to Replica and allows you to create buckets at a specific test. You can see I added it to the example one user flow with a status of passed. And then if we look in here, so same thing on this, right? This is just example 2, date and time. It's going to a separate user flow. But what we can see is we actually go inside here. The last piece of this is I actually was leveraging our visual page load analysis, which you can see in this session label here to actually measure the cold start of the application. In the other session that we should be able to see here, I was actually measuring page transition time from display in the display page. So out of the box, basic examples, but shows the complete, end-to-end journey of using automation, coupled with HeadSpin APIs to correlate specific sessions to specific user flows, organize your test cases on the platform, and use our annotation in Visual Analytics library to capture specific KPIs.